he died in Auschwitz after the second week. He was hit in the head for talking back to an assessment. And he didn't die immediately. From what I understand, he was taken, when he talked back, he was hit. He was taken to the hospital. And then one of the Jewish hospital attendants told me that they made it easier for him. They gave him a needle and that he died. I couldn't believe it because he was okay about 2 hours before. I went over to the so-called Haufen. That was a pile of bodies near the hospital. And I must have moved, probably 60 or 70 bodies till I got to his. Then I knew. I had to see him, you see.
How did you and your other brother manage on the train?
Well, the train trip was, it was just a nightmare. In other words, we were on the train for 4 days, going just a short distance. And the people were, just around us, everybody was dead. You can just imagine, they probably loaded up 40,000 people. 18,000 arrived. That means that we had about 22,000 or thereabouts dead. In other words, some of those wagons were just emptied with pick. In other words, just shoveled out with a pick. Totally. In other words, some of them, nobody was alive.
What kind of camp was this?
We went to Lerchen. It was a work camp. Things, considering everything, all our previous experiences, Lerchen wasn't too bad. We worked on Steinbruch, which is breaking stones, building canals, breaking, one of the main things, it was a heavily wooded area, so we had to throw down trees. And we were throwing down trees and then dynamiting the trunks. We had the charge of the dynamite, in other words, under German supervision. And if they gave us only a short little cord for the dynamiting purposes, hoping that some of those guys won't run fast enough from underneath, from too close to the dynamite, well, some got injured. Pieces of wood hit them in the head or whatever, because they couldn't run that fast away from the dynamite. But basically speaking, the camp, all things considering, that camp was a work camp, which wasn't too bad.
Were you ever injured or beaten?
Yes, I was beaten in Lerchen by the SS about 3 or 4 times, mostly for picking up, say, a raw potato on the way to work. We passed by the kitchen, and there was a potato lying around, and I picked it up. I got 25 with a birch twig on the back. And again and again. You didn't stop. The preservation, in other words, the wanting to live or have something to eat, the temptation is too great to resist if you see something that is edible, to leave it. So you take your chances. That was Lerchen. My brother was with me all the time, the youngest brother. And there were some friends, cousins, a couple of cousins with me, and my brother-in-law, my sister had married in the first year of the ghetto. Her husband was with me as well. So there were 5 of us, really. In numbers, there is strength, and we tried to support each other somehow, even sometimes with a sense of humor, believe it or not.
Can you give an example?
Well, things like my cousin stayed in a ditch and begged that God should take his life fast so that he shouldn't have to suffer. And my brother-in-law trying to tell him, well, if you live through that, they'll take you in a special box and show you, in a glass box, and show you through the world and tell you that this is a Jew who lived through the Nazi regime. And next to me was standing he was a very good friend. He's in San Francisco. And he said, oh, you idiot, if you don't go to work the next day, you'll starve to death. That's the kind, that I call humor.
What was the next move that you made?
I beg your pardon?
What was the next move?
Well, the next move that we made, we were sent to Flossenburg. Flossenburg was the last camp we were in, and that happened by sometime February or end of January or February 1945. We were sent to Flossenburg. Flossenburg was also a work camp. As a matter of fact, some of the time we worked indoors, which we never did before. And in Flossenburg, we found an accordion and a violin. My cousin was a violinist, and I played the accordion. Playing the piano, I could play the accordion. We picked it up, and we had some extra food because of that. Of course, needless to say that we shared it among the 5 of us. We helped them, and the people gave us extra bread. We played not for we played mainly for the capos. But the capos had authority, and they let us, for instance, stay in instead of having to go out in the cold. And it was still very, very cold, February, March. And we had that privilege of staying in. We had the privilege of extra food, which wasn't too bad. And that's just about what was happening in Flossenburg. Although I must say that the first example of some people must have been awfully hungry in Flossenburg, because I saw a case of cannibalism in Flossenburg. Personally, I saw it myself. So you go through certain things that you kind of bury behind in your mind in order to remain normal, if there is such a thing. And Flossenburg was the last camp that we were in. And about April 18th or 19th, they started liquidating Flossenburg. There were groups of 4,000 leaving every 5 or 6 hours for a death march. We call it death march now, but then it was just a march supposedly to go to Dachau. Nobody was ever supposed to make Dachau. Nobody did. out of the 16 or 20,000 people from Flossenburg, there were only 2,000 or 3,000 alive, and I was among them, who were liberated on the march to Dachau.
How did you stay alive?
Well, the trick was they were shooting indiscriminately anybody that fell behind. Some of those four or five transports, for instance, I never met anybody from the third transport. That means that those people are gone. There's nobody there. I met a couple of people from this first, from the second. I was in the fourth, and there were about 1,000 people left from our transport only. The trick of survival was just not to fall behind, to stay on top of it, to stay first. And we marched at night and supposedly rested during the day. They usually put a very swampy place for us to lie down so that less and less would be able to get up. And the nights that we spent, there were only 3 nights. The nights that we spent, after they said get up and march again, they called it cleaning up the place, which means 10 or 12 SS-men went in, and whoever stayed behind was shot. The ones that moved out walked and were shot if they fell behind. So this was more or less the story about
Where did you find
Flossenburg.
the strength to go on?
Well, not only did I find the strength to go on, but I and one of my cousins helped out my other cousin, and we dragged him one night throughout, ahead of the game. And this man is alive today. He is here to testify that he is living because of the 2 of us. So he's living in New York, and he knows that we dragged him. He said, leave me, look, if I'm shot, I'm shot, you know. But we felt we want to try. And the strength, I don't know where it came from. You know, you somehow, when you have to do something, you do it.